Welcome back to Secret Speaks. How has your day been? Now let's uncover the mystery hidden in today's story. At 10:58 last night, my son texted family only and erased me from the trip I paid for. By 8:15 this morning, I had turned on owner verification for the travel card ending 4821, the same card every invoice used and every confirmation pulled from my account. I am Evelyn Hart from Pasadena, and I am done funding disrespect. Now listen with me to the airport, 8 suitcases in a neat row, a child trying not to cry, and at 9:05 a scanner that will say, declined. A gate agent will try again. Second attempt declined, ma'am. I did not do it to punish anyone. I did it because boundaries deserve funding too. 9:05 in the morning and my phone vibrates across the kitchen table in my Pasadena bungalow while the kettle begins to hum on the stove. Michael's name flashes, and I let it slide into voicemail. A text from Sabrina follows a breath later, telling me they are at check-in and asking me to run the card. Another buzz arrives with a voice message. I tap play with the volume low, and the airport pours into my kitchen. I hear a suitcase thump over a seam in the floor, an announcement rolling into another, a child whimpering and then shushing. A scanner beeps. It is the flat refusal I know from grocery lines and parking garages. Someone clears a throat. Sabrina uses the smooth voice she keeps for clients and asks the agent to try again. The second beep lands heavier than the first. I slide the kettle off the heat and lay a towel over the lid so the rattle does not press against my head. The wall clock says 9:06. Their flight is slated for 10:45. Boarding has not started. They are still tethered to a counter and to a small gray machine that is deciding what happens next. I set the phone face down and let the call end without my breath in it. Sunlight moves across the tile in a bright bar. On the fridge, a heavy magnet grips a tidy stack of papers. Invoices and confirmations, each with my name, each drawn from my account. The sight steadies me more than the tea I am about to pour. I breathe the way the grief counselor taught me after Rob died. In through the nose hold out through pursed lips. The hum in my chest smooths into something even. A new voicemail lands. Sabrina explains that the system at check-in can be temperamental and asks if I can call the bank. In the background, Michael tells the kids they will have pretzels soon and that everything is fine. He is performing calm, and I recognize the little boy who once did the same after a fall on the driveway. Memory is not here to make me weak. It is here to draw a straight line from then to now. Another text appears. The agent says there is a verification hold and asks me to unlock it. The words are polite and ordinary. They are also a request that knows exactly what it is asking for. I could unlock it. I could call Daniel at Redwood Community Bank and watch a screen change from declined to approved and pretend that would change anything else. I do not call. I stir honey into my tea and let the steam rise with the small comfort of a choice that belongs to me. The phone rings again. I answer and say hello softly. The first voice I hear is not my son's. It is the agent at the counter. He says the second attempt did not go through and asks if there is another card to try. Sabrina tells him the trip was paid, and he explains that payment for this property is captured at check-in and that the account holder must authorize. He uses the phrase on file, and I feel the truth of it land. On file is my card. On file ends with the 4 numbers I could recite half asleep, 4821. I do not explain any of that. I tell them I will look. Silence opens and does the work that years of pleading could not. Michael breaks it first. He asks if I can please check again that the kids are excited and he does not want them to be upset. I tell him I heard him and I wish him patience. Habit makes him thank me. He says they will try again in 5 minutes, and the call ends. The kettle has stopped singing. I pour tea and carry it to the window. The lemon tree Rob planted the year we moved in throws a small shade across the bricks. Spring gives Pasadena a shimmer that makes everything look braver than it is. A sparrow lands, pecks once, and rockets away. I do not picture their faces at the counter. I have spent enough of my life narrating other people's choices. I drink and let the warmth settle where decision lives. I tap the airline app. A message waits that says the reservation is pending payment at the property and that the guest must present the card on file at check-in and contact the cardholder if verification is required. It is the same language that greets thousands of travelers. Today it speaks to my kitchen and to the small red badge on my bank app that has been there since yesterday when I set owner verification required with Daniel. He told me he would be on call but in and out on Saturday. That was fine. What we put in place does not need to be watched to keep working. I did not do this in anger. I set a door where there had been a hole and decided I would be the one to hold the key. Another buzz, a short call ends, and a text follows that says, "This needs to be cleared right now." I write one sentence. I am not available to verify any charges. The dots that mean someone is typing appear, vanish, return, then nothing. A new voicemail lands. Michael describes it as a bank flag on a large transaction and says all I need to do is approve it. He adds that he hopes I will not take any of this the wrong way. I set the cup down. The wrong way is the phrase people use when they want you to stop noticing what they did. I move the magnet on the fridge a touch higher and feel the tug bite into steel. Paper does not ask me to be reasonable. It reflects what is true. I call the bank and leave a message in Daniel's general mailbox because it is Saturday and he warned me he might be in and out. I say the verification setting we discussed is working as intended and that no further action is requested. I thank him and hang up. It is a courtesy to the one person in this arrangement who treats my consent as a requirement and not a favor. An email from the resort arrives next. It is calm and precise. It says the method used for this booking requires a successful authorization when the guest arrives, and that the reservation will cancel if authorization fails. It notes that the attempt has been logged and recommends contacting the travel agency to rebook. There is no mention of me because the resort does not know me. It knows a process and follows it. I slice an apple and arrange the pieces on a small thrift shop plate I like for the tiny river-shaped flaw in its glaze. That plate reminds me that a mark becomes part of the pattern when you stop pretending it is not there. I take a bite and listen for a boarding announcement even though I know it is too early. What I hear instead is my own house being ordinary. A truck shifting gears on Allen Avenue. The neighbor's wine chime figuring itself out. The phone lights again and I answer. Michael tries for steady. He says the agent believes a call to the bank will fix this and that they are cutting it close. He says the kids are excited and now they are asking questions. I tell him I heard him and that I am not available to approve anything. He goes quiet and then says he understands. He does not. Not yet. He ends the call because there are other demands in front of him at that counter. That is fine. Reality is doing the teaching this morning. I check the time, 9:27. 9. I think about what I told Daniel when he asked me to confirm the setting yesterday. I told him I was choosing a quiet solution. I do not owe noise to anyone. I place the phone face down again so its small body can push its energy into the wood instead of up my arm. I press my palm to the table the way you press a page to keep your place. The morning moves forward on both sides of town. In my kitchen, the tea has cooled and the air smells like lemon and heat. In the terminal, a second attempt has already failed, and a family is meeting a boundary that has been there all along, finally visible because someone decided to stop pretending it was not. I steady my hand on the table and let the quiet deepen. Then my thoughts step backward to the work that made this morning possible. In the late months of 2019, I sat in a small room at Huntington Memorial while a monitor surrendered to silence, and the nurse said Rob's name with a gentleness that could not do anything about the fact itself. Afterward, the bungalow held the outline of him like chalk that rain had not yet reached. I would walk the hall and catch the clean mix of motor oil and soap and stand with my palm on the banister until the air turned back into ordinary air. The first year was practice in breathing and in learning the sounds of a house that had only one pair of shoes by the door and one cup beside the sink. By the start of 2021, I decided the next chapter needed a small address, even if it was just a scrap of tape on a jar. I pulled a cloudy mason jar from under the sink, pressed a strip of masking tape on its side, and wrote 2 plain words with a fat black marker that only I would ever see. I tucked the jar behind folded dish towels like a promise to myself. Whenever a choice left a few dollars, I fed the jar. I skipped a movie rental and slid in a 5. I picked the tea on sale and added 3 ones. I ran a fan at dusk instead of the air conditioner and folded a single 10 into the glass. The sound of money touching glass was both ridiculous and holy. A jar steadies the spirit, but it does not build a plan, so I opened a spreadsheet and gave myself work again. A florist on Sierra Madre Boulevard hired me part-time to untangle their books. A handyman service handed me a grocery bag of crumpled fuel slips, and I turned them into neat columns that agreed with each other. In spring, I sat at a folding table at the senior center during tax season and helped people with shoeboxes that smelled like attics and hope. Every check went into a separate account at Redwood Community Bank, a login with a nickname that reminded me what belonged there. Boundaries are easier to honor when a screen repeats them back to you. Sometime that summer, I created a folder on my laptop and named it after the island Rob loved. We had spent our 5th anniversary on Maui with a rental car that groaned through tight turns and a sunburn he pretended not to mind. He would stand where the foam laced the sand and say the water sounded like someone telling a joke he almost understood. We said that one day we would go back with family. Grief can be a carpenter if you let it. It builds a bench beside the loss where you can set down a plan and begin to sand it smooth. By the end of 2022, the numbers were honest enough for deposits. The agent at Pacific Horizon Travel was a patient woman named Renee Park, who listened when I said I needed flat paths for slower knees and a table long enough to hold 8 plates without elbows knocking. She found a villa in Wailea that met those rules. I paid a deposit of $5,000 and learned the balance would be captured at check-in. I bought airline tickets from Los Angeles to Maui for $7,200 and tucked the itineraries beneath the heavy magnet on my fridge. I booked a family snorkeling tour for Sunny $1,800 and a mid-size rental car for $900 because I did not need a large vehicle to feel important. Each payment appeared as a clean line in my history, and in the spreadsheet I wrote what those lines really were. Not just amounts, promises. The year 2023 became the year of finishing. I sold Rob's drill press to a young man whose father would teach him how to keep his hands safe. I reconciled more months for the handyman who came by one Saturday and fixed the screen door that had always stuck. I walked a woman who ran a dog bakery through her first honest profit and showed her how to file it without panic. Every dollar went into the same account that wore the same small name on the login screen. By January of this year, the footer on my spreadsheet clicked into a complete sum that did not wobble when I looked at it. $24,900. Villa $15,000 with $5,000 already down and $10,000 due at check-in. Flight $7,200. Tour $1,800. Car $900. A clean total for a clean plan. I kept everything because paper steadies me. Every invoice carried my name. Every confirmation drew from my account. There were no authorized users. By then, Renee knew my voice. We laughed about sofas that swallow you whole and sofas that hold you upright while you drink coffee. She sent a link to simple matching shirts that would read like together without shouting at strangers on the beach. I ordered a soft blue for adults and a brighter one for kids. For Olivia, who is 8, I tucked a slim book about sea turtles into a bag with crayons and a pack of gum for when the cabin pressure makes ears complain. For Noah, who is 6, I found a little plastic camera that clicks in a way that satisfies a child even if no picture ever appears. The bags waited on the dresser in the spare room, and each time I passed that doorway, I let my fingers brush the tissue paper and felt a small lift that said, a good thing can be brought closer by looking at it often. Not every detail is grand, and that is the point. I lowered 2 light fixtures to lower wattage. I paused a cable package and listened to the senior center news when I needed voices in the morning. I held a yard sale and let the neighbor who always wanted Rob's fishing stool carry it away for a price that was more gratitude than cash. A shoreline is shaped by small waves that touch it again and again. This trip was my shoreline. Around Thanksgiving, my neighbor Janet arrived with a pie that tasted like cinnamon and the face of someone who wished her phone could unshow a picture. She handed it over anyway because truth is kinder than pretending. Michael and Sabrina and her side of the family stood in matching sweaters by a lit tree. The caption used 2 words that sat in my throat for the rest of the night. Family unit. I rinsed the pie dish when it came back to me and sat down to write a grocery list for the villa kitchen. Ginger chews for Olivia. Fresh bread for the first morning so no one has to rush. Coffee for adults who will not sleep well in a new bed. When the total crossed the line, I had promised myself I opened the bank app and moved the money into the travel account created for this single purpose. There is a strange relief in watching a number fall to near 0 in one place and rise in another when you told it to move. Inside the settings, I noticed a feature I had never needed. Owner verification required. It looked like a polite switch for people who travel with assistants and unfamiliar hands. I did not imagine it would become my shield. I made a note of its presence and closed the screen. Winter evenings, I let the island into the house the way a song enters from another room when the door is open a little. I remembered Rob asking if I had packed the sunblock and insisting he did not need it while his shoulders turned the color of baked salmon. I pictured the kids building a fort from sand and indignation and yelling at the tide for editing their work. I saw the patio table and a single lavender candle, the scent I burned the week after we lost him when I needed the room to smell like a promise that the world might stop ending hourly. I pictured each of us offering one word about the kind of man he was, rather than trying to net a lifetime with speeches that would only make us cry. These were not fantasies. They were drafts that taught the heart the shape of a future. Back in the kitchen, the phone nudges the wood again, and I do not flip it over. I walk to the spare room and check the gifts for the kids the way a person checks on bread rising. Shirts folded in plastic. Hibiscus keychains that will ring lightly against zippers. a small bottle of motion sickness medicine beside a pack of tissues. On the dresser sits the printed itinerary with my name at the top because I booked it, and I paid for it, and I added notes for Patricia, who prefers a ground floor room, and for Alan, who climbs stairs slow and steady. I thought of them because they would be there. I thought of me because I believed I would be there too. Once a counselor asked me what I wanted from the next 5 years. I said I wanted to feel like a person and not just a list of roles. Widow, mother, provider. All true and all incomplete. Planning this trip was the way I stitched a person from assigned pieces. A calendar entry can seem flimsy, yet if you stack enough pages, the stack grows heavy. I carry the travel folder back to the kitchen and slide it under the magnet on the fridge because I like how it speaks without saying anything. The clock still has not reached 9:30. Across town, a screen shows the same 4 digits that end the card on file while an agent explains a policy that has nothing personal in it at all. Here, the proof of my intention sits in neat stacks that do not require anyone else to agree. Money moved from my hands into this plan. Time moved from my days into this plan. Love moved from memory into this plan. I rinse my cup, set it in the rack, and let the small sounds of a living house tell me I am still here. At 10:58 on the night of March 21st, my phone lit the kitchen with that pale blue square that can make a room feel colder. I was rinsing the last plate, and the house was quiet enough to hear the drip in the sink when the message from Michael arrived. It said I would not be joining them and that his wife preferred to keep the trip family only. I read it once, then again without breathing, then a third time, as if repetition might bend the words into something kinder. The screen did not change. The sentence sat there neat and polite and brutal. I dried my hands on the dish towel that has a lemon embroidered in the corner and placed the phone on the table as if it were an object that could be set down like any other. The clock over the stove clicked forward another minute, and I realized my shoulders had moved up toward my ears. I told them to lower. I do not remember walking to the chair, only the feeling of the wood under my palm as I sat and made the world hold still. The first thought that arrived was not anger. It was clarity. A line had been drawn, and it was not a line I would ever have drawn for myself. I opened my email because the body looks for facts when the heart is insulted. Renee Park had sent the final travel packet that afternoon. I clicked through to the itinerary and scrolled slowly the way a person traces a scar. Names arranged themselves under the heading guest details in the order travel companies seem to prefer. Michael Hart, Sabrina Cole Hart, Olivia Hart, Noah Hart, Patricia Cole, Alan Cole, Victoria Cole, Ethan Brooks. 8 names. I kept scrolling in case a 9th waited under a fold in the page. There was no 9th. There was no Evelyn Hart. The air in the kitchen thinned for a moment and then returned. I closed my eyes and saw the spare room where the gift bags waited like bright little promises. The soft blue shirts for grown-ups and the lighter ones for the kids. The small book about sea turtles for Olivia. The clicking toy camera for Noah. The hibiscus keychains that would have rung against zippers. I pictured the wooden table in the villa that I had chosen because it could hold 8 plates without elbows knocking, and I almost laughed at the arithmetic of it. I had planned for all of them. They had planned without me. I did not answer the text. The temptation to type something surgical rose and fell like a wave. A paragraph that would list facts and receipts and the simplest truth, which is that I paid for the thing I was being told to sit out. But I have learned how quickly a reply becomes a debate and how debates can be used to turn a wound into a negotiation. I put the phone face down and let the silence fill the kitchen to its corners. A sentence arrived in my head with the weight of a book placed firmly on a shelf. This was not a misunderstanding. They had removed me from a trip I paid for. No more translating someone else's decision into something easier to forgive. I stood and walked to the fridge. The heavy magnet held the tidy stack of confirmations that had comforted me all winter. Each invoice carried my name. Each confirmation drew from my account at Redwood Community Bank, the travel account with the small nickname that reminded me to leave it alone. I pressed the papers flat with my fingertips and felt steadier than I had a minute before. Paper does not raise its voice. It does not explain. It simply shows you what is true. The next minutes were slow and precise in the way certain moments insist on being. I opened the banking app and looked at the travel account balance and the list of recent transactions. The deposit for the villa was there, and the airline charges and the snorkeling tour and the rental car. There were no authorized users on the account. The tiny gear icon that holds settings glowed as innocent as it always does. I tapped through and saw again the feature I had noticed months ago and filed away in a corner of my mind. Owner verification required. A setting built for assistance and unfamiliar hands. A boundary that could be made visible to a merchant at the exact moment a charge tried to go through. I did not touch it then. Not in anger, not as a reaction. Instead, I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred in the black parts, and I asked myself what I wanted to remember about this night in a year or two. I did not want to remember begging to be included in something I had built. I did not want to remember explaining my worth to my own child. I wanted to remember that I chose an action that matched the facts. I walked to the sink and ran the tap just long enough to cool the pitcher for the fridge. That small chore steadied my hands. Somewhere on the other side of town, Michael and Sabrina were likely finishing their own lists for the morning. Travel days have their own choreography. I knew it by heart because I had written it for them. The late-night pairing of socks. The search for the one charger everyone swears they saw. The zip of a suitcase that has been persuaded to close over optimism. I felt a flicker of pity for the parts of them that were simply people trying to get to a gate on time. Pity does not cancel truth. It only keeps your own edges from turning cruel. The phone buzzed once on the table and then stopped. No new message appeared. I sat again and thought about a conversation last year when Janet next door showed me a holiday photo with a caption that used two small words that did not include me. Family unit. It had stung then, and still I had gone on planning this trip because I believed shared time could loosen the grip of habits. Tonight that belief felt old and thin. Some patterns are not accidents. They are choices that like to dress up as preferences. I opened the travel folder on my laptop and scrolled to the contact list. Pacific Horizon Travel had a 24-hour number, and Renee had told me to call any time if I needed to confirm a policy. I did not call her. I did not need to ask a stranger for permission to believe what I already knew. Pay at check-in meant the remaining balance would be authorized when the guest presented the card on file. The card on file ended in 4 digits I could say half asleep. 4821. It was mine, and the account it touched was mine. Tomorrow morning, a person behind a counter would ask a bank to say yes. I would be the person who could say no. I walked to the spare room and stood in the doorway. The gift bags looked back at me like small animals that do not understand what changed. I lifted the one with the book about sea turtles and set it on the bed, then put it back on the dresser because I do not make decisions while standing. I turned off the lamp and watched the room fold into the kind of darkness that belongs to a house that is not afraid. On my way down the hall, I paused by the lemon tree outside the window and pictured Rob wearing his ridiculous hat from our last visit to Maui, the one he said made him look like a movie extra. He would have made a joke tonight at the exact moment I needed it. I made a quieter one in my head. If a boundary is a door, then tonight I found the key that locks it from my side. Back in the kitchen, I set an alarm for the morning and placed the phone screen down again. I brewed a small cup of tea because the motions were ordinary, and the ordinary is a kind of blessing when a day tries to tilt. I did not send a message asking for reconsideration. I did not call to ask for an explanation that would only turn into a weather report about someone else's feelings. I wrote a single sentence in my paper notebook because ink often says what a screen cannot hold. Act where your consent is required. Then I closed the notebook and slid it under the travel folder so the words would rest against the plans they were meant to protect. When the tea was gone, I washed the cup and put it on the rack. The clock over the stove moved to 11:40, and the house breathed its small nighttime breath. I lifted the stack of confirmations from the fridge and tucked them into the folder so nothing could fall. In the morning, I would call the bank and speak clearly. I would ask for the setting to be placed on the card that ends in the 4 digits I know by heart. I would choose a time that fits the reality of a 10:45 departure from LAX. I would do it without apology and without theatrics. Tonight I would sleep in a house that remembers my name with the papers that bear it resting where I can reach them. I set my hand flat on the table and let the quiet hold. Morning came, and I did what a responsible owner does. I brewed coffee, ate half a slice of toast, opened the folder with my records, and called Redwood Community Bank. After the menu steps, a calm voice came on a man who introduced himself as Daniel Cho. He verified me as the account owner with the usual ladder of checks. I gave the last 4 of my social the answer to a security question Rob chose years ago that still makes me smile and the mobile number on file. A code landed on my phone. I read it back. The box was checked. No favors asked, no favors owed. I told him I needed a control placed on a specific card. He asked which. I said the travel card ending in 4821, the only primary card on file for our reservation. I heard him tap a few keys, and then he confirmed what I already knew. No authorized users, no secondary card. The card sat on a dedicated travel account with a nickname he could see on his screen that matched mine. He asked the outcome I wanted. I said every attempted charge must require owner approval, especially hotel check-in and incidentals, and that nothing should go through without me. He said there was a precise setting for that. Owner verification required. It forces a step-up check whenever a merchant attempts to authorize. If the owner does nothing, the charge is declined. He listed the touch points. Hotels, car rentals, airline add-ons, tour vendors, anything that behaves like a card on file. He warned that if I did choose to approve something, there could be a short delay while the terminal refreshes. I told him I could live with that. He explained the path my approval request would take. First, a push notification inside the bank app. If I do not respond, a backup automated call. He asked me to confirm my contact info and make sure my phone can receive those calls. I told him my sound is on for numbers that matter. He offered to add a note on the account that the owner verification requirement was placed by me with his initials and the date, so a branch employee could see the history if needed. I said yes. He also flagged that the setting is travel-related and that authorizations may attempt in California and Hawaii in the same window, which helps the fraud system not overcorrect. We moved to timing. I gave him the flight from LAX to OGG at 10:45 Saturday morning and estimated they would reach the desk between 8:30 and 9. I wanted the requirement live before they handed any card to anyone. He asked if I wanted it active immediately or scheduled. Scheduled prevents false denials on any legitimate pending item while locking the behavior when it matters. I chose scheduled. He asked for a time. I spoke it clearly and then again to hear it settle in the room. I scheduled the verification lock for 8:15 a.m., well before takeoff. He repeated the time and date. Saturday, March 23rd, 8:15 in the morning Pacific. He reminded me that if a completely different card is presented, my setting will not apply. I asked him to confirm once more that one card is on file. He did. He asked if I wanted a travel notice. I said no because I do not intend to approve any use during those dates. He asked if I wanted to expand owner verification to all cards across my profile. I said not today. For now, I wanted one card, one rule, one schedule. He told me where to see the status change from scheduled to active on my phone and how to reverse the setting later if I choose. I thanked him for treating my consent like a requirement. He saved the note and read back the case number. We ended the call. I opened the bank app to see the line that mattered tagged scheduled. I wrote the time on a sticky note and pressed it to the laptop. 8:15 a.m., well before takeoff. Saying it out loud made the house feel even. Exact is a calmer feeling than angry. Next, I called Pacific Horizon Travel and asked for Renee. She answered with that steady voice that tells you someone enjoys doing things correctly. I told her I wanted to reconfirm policy I already understood. Pay at check-in means the remaining balance is authorized when the guest presents the card on file. She said yes. I asked whether any backup card had been added without my knowledge. She said absolutely not. The system shows a single card ending in 4821 name on file, Evelyn Hart. I asked what happens if authorization fails. She said the reservation cancels under the policy, and the party can contact the agency to discuss rebooking. She offered to add a line to my file that the account owner will be available to the bank, only not to the traveling party, and that a call from the party may arrive if the resort cancels. I agreed. Clear files help everyone. I printed a one-page summary for myself and wrote the pieces in large letters. LAX to OGG, 10:45. Owner verification at 8:15. Card ending 4821. One primary travel card on file. I slid the page into the front sleeve of the travel folder and set the folder where I could see it without opening a drawer. A plan belongs on the table when it is about to become real. I stood at the sink and let the water run low and steady. It is easy to rehearse the insult until it fills every corner. It is harder and more useful to do the next correct thing. I had built a week that would have been a soft reprieve. I had listed ginger chews for Olivia and ground floor for Patricia and slow stairs for Alan. I had considered what structure would soothe Sabrina without turning a vacation into a set of chores. In return, I was handed a sentence that removed me and repackaged my absence as preference. I wiped that thought like a spill. Once across. Rinse the cloth. Once more until it is gone. My phone chimed with a calendar alert I had forgotten to cancel. It told me to confirm the snorkel time with the kids' energy in mind. I dismissed it and opened a blank note and typed a single line to keep my actions clean for the rest of the day. Act where your consent controls the outcome. Then I closed the note and checked the clock. 9:23. There was plenty of morning left and no reason to rush. I stepped outside with the last of my coffee and looked at the lemon tree Rob planted when we moved in. The fruit hung low and the leaves were glossy, a small report card that the irrigation schedule was right. Back inside, I called the bank one last time to test the notification path. Daniel had offered a dummy alert to prove the route. My phone chirped with a test that confirmed a verification would appear at the scheduled time. I dismissed it and felt a quiet satisfaction take the chair where anxiety had been sitting. Systems that behave as promised might be the last honest comfort left in a world that prefers drama. I set a tea bag in a cup for later and sat with my phone. I opened the message thread with Michael and stared at the empty line where words go. I did not want to litigate last night's sentence. I did not want to translate disrespect into a debate. I wanted one kind offer that would age well no matter what came next. Something like an offer to help with the kids' bags or to drop off motion sickness bands for Olivia. I let the thought stay in my head. Some sentences mature when you wait. The magnet on the fridge held the thinner stack of papers, and the folder on the table held everything else. The sticky note by the laptop said what mattered. 8:15 in the morning. I placed the phone face down and let the room be quiet again. By late morning, the steadiness that follows a firm choice had taken hold, so I made one small offer that kept Grace on the table. I texted Michael that I could drop off snack packs, motion sickness bands for Olivia, and 2 sticker books for the plane. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, and the read receipt settled under my words. No reply followed. I set the phone down and let the quiet be exactly what it was. I filled the next hour with ordinary tasks, because ordinary keeps a person upright. I sorted the mail, wiped the counters in straight lines, and tucked the kids' gift bags into the spare room closet so the tissue would not tempt me to fuss. Around 1:30, the phone lit with Sabrina's name. I answered because clarity can afford manners. She said she was confirming that the final payment would go through in the morning and that the villa would be set. Her voice was all business, smooth and clipped like confirming a floral drop. I said the balance would be authorized at check-in using the travel card on file. She said perfect, and added that they would be at the desk early, so a morning charge was ideal. I told her I heard her and wished her a calm packing afternoon. We ended there. I opened the bank app and tapped into the travel account. The line that mattered showed clean on the screen. One primary travel card on file ending in 4821. Owner verification required was set to activate at 8:15 in the morning. I read it twice, not from doubt, but because exactness steadies me. I checked that my number was correct, that unknown callers would not be blocked, that the app notifications were on. Then I closed the phone and wrote the plan by hand in my notebook so my mind would file it properly. Wake at 7, app open by 8, verification live at 8:15. Let the system do its work. I looked at the sentence that had been waiting since last night and wrote it without flinching. I did not freeze it out of spite. I froze it because boundaries deserve funding too. The words stood there on the page like a beam that keeps 2 walls from crushing each other. The afternoon unspooled in a quiet I recognized. I stepped into the backyard and checked the lemon tree Rob planted when we moved in. 2 mourning doves pretended I was not there. A sprinkler down the block came on with a soft click, and the sound of water stitched the air. Back inside, I made a simple lunch and ate it at the table with the travel folder open beside me like a companion who only nods. I slid the snorkeling voucher to the front pocket so it would not vanish behind papers that had lost their job. A calendar banner slid across the phone reminding me to reconfirm ground transport. I dismissed it and watched it disappear like a guest who had already said their goodbyes. At 3:15, the family thread lit up. Sabrina posted a photo of matching straw hats and said the kids looked adorable. Olivia grinned. Noah held his brim like a pilot. I saved the picture and wrote nothing. Loving children does not require endorsing the stage being built around them. Michael added a thumbs up and a line about printing boarding passes. The dots waited for me. I closed the thread so they could stop waiting. I walked the house in a slow circle and touched the things that would matter in the morning. The travel folder by the fruit bowl, the charger coiled and ready, a single page on the fridge with the big pieces in large letters. LAX to OGG, 10:45, verification at 8:15. Card ending 4821, one primary travel card on file. I pressed my palm against the paper the way you hold your place in a book and felt the room go even. Near 4, Daniel returned my earlier courtesy call. His voicemail said the schedule was set, the test path had worked, and the main number could route an urgent authorization question if needed. I saved the message because a voice that treats consent like a requirement deserves a place to live. I set his contact under his name and put the phone face down again. Evening began to fold itself into the house. I ran a load of laundry and folded it at the end of the bed while the small radio murmured the news. When the basket was empty, I clicked the radio off and the quiet returned like it had been waiting in the hall. In the spare room, I lifted the tissue over the children's bags, not to change anything, just to honor the hours and dollars that had gathered there. The paper made a soft sound and settled back. Just before 6, the phone rang with Michael's name. I watched it for 3 rings and then answered. He said he wanted to be sure all the pieces were lined up so the kids would not wait at check-in. I said the resort would collect the balance using the travel card on file. There was a half-breath of silence, and then he said, "Good, that is what we thought," and mentioned getting to the airport early to beat the line. I told him I hoped traffic would be kind. He said, "Thanks, Mom," and the call ended without a single word about the sentence that began this turn. People often climb over the most important part so they can pretend they have already arrived somewhere else. I set the kettle on and wrote a small morning list, because small lists act like rails. Turn off, do not disturb. Volume up. App open. Verification live at 8:15. Let the system speak. The lines calmed me more than any speech could have. I washed the 2 plates by the sink, poured hot water over a tea bag, and carried the cup to the back step. The sky behind the eucalyptus shifted from gold to a deeper blue. A skateboard rattled across a driveway. A parent called out about a helmet. These are the sounds of a neighborhood still doing what neighborhoods do. Before bed, I checked the bank app one last time. The word that mattered sat beside the setting like a quiet promise. Scheduled. 8:15. I set 2 alarms, one at 6:55 and one at 7. I turned off any focus mode that might silence a call. I opened a new message to Michael and typed the offer I had drafted earlier. "If you want the bands and the sticker books, I can leave them on your porch tonight." I looked at it, then deleted it and closed the thread. Some sentences belong to morning. I stood at the fridge and read the page again. LAX to OGG, 10:45, verification at 8:15, card ending 4821, one primary travel card on file. The paper did not argue, it did not explain, it simply held what was true. I turned out the kitchen light and left the phone face down beside the travel folder in the glow from the window. The house settled into its small breathing. Exact? quiet, ready for morning. I woke before the alarm and let the kitchen light up slow. At 7, I turned off every setting that might block a call, checked that unknown numbers could reach me, and opened the bank app so the screen that mattered sat one touch away. The travel folder waited by the fruit bowl like a quiet witness. I set the kettle on, drew the curtains, and read the page on the fridge that held the day in 4 lines. LAX to OGG, 10:45, verification 8:15. Card ending 4821, one primary travel card on file. At 7:50, Sabrina posted a story from the curb at LAX. 8 suitcases stood in a row, and the caption said, "Off to Paradise Family Only." A minute later, a voice note from Olivia arrived bright and breathless about sea turtles and the ocean smelling like the big candle on my mantle. I pressed the phone to my chest and made a promise I could keep. "I will see you when the adults are careful with you." I watched the digits turn. At 8:15, a small banner slid across my screen as neatly as a train on time. "Owner verification required is now active. No ceremony was necessary. Exactness is its own comfort." I left the app open, poured tea, and walked the house like a librarian, closing the last book before opening ours. The spare room door stood ajar. The gift bags rested under a folded throw. I did not touch them. At 8:40, a ping landed in the family thread. I did not open it. A text from Michael followed with the simple note that they were at the counter. I replied with a short wish for patience and set the phone face up on the table where my eyes could find whatever came next. The airport arrived first in the form of noise down a phone line. Announcements a squeal from a suitcase wheel, the restless rhythm of a place where many people need the same things at once. The first push notification came a few minutes later. A request to authorize the remaining villa balance at check-in. The screen offered approve or decline. I did neither. I let the request expire. The app logged a result in small factual type. Authorization not confirmed by owner. At 8:54, a second request arrived from the car rental counter for a pre-authorization hold. I let it wait. Then I let it fail. This was not triumph. It was a rule I had written for my own survival, performing as designed. At 9, the phone rang. I answered and said his name so he would not have to. He said there was a weird error at check-in, and the desk kept getting a contact the bank message. He asked if I could look. I said I would look. I did not apologize, and I did not debate. Behind him, a scanner chirped a refusal, and a woman nearby said it must be a system glitch. Glitch is a softer word than boundary, but boundaries do not ask for better adjectives. We ended the call with nothing promised that was not mine to promise. I read my page again to keep myself from narrating feelings that would not change the facts. LAX to OGG, 10:45, verification 8:15. Card ending 4821. One primary travel card on file. The paper did not argue or soothe. It held steady and my chest matched it. An email from the resort arrived at 9:10. It confirmed that an authorization attempt had failed and explained that failure to present an alternate payment would cancel the reservation under policy. No names were needed. A process speaks its own language. I saved the message and poured the tea I had forgotten, then decided it had cooled past usefulness and made a fresh cup. I sliced an apple, 3 tidy pieces for now and the rest for later. The knife through fruit steadied me more than the phone could. Another call came, and this time I let it ring to voicemail. Michael said the agent suggested I call the bank to approve. He said the kids were excited and they would try again. People under pressure often list the parts of the story that carry no blame. Excited children, busy counters, unhelpful machines. It is easier than looking back 2 nights to the sentence that began this morning. At 9:18, a third authorization flashed from the Villa system, a retry after the desk rekeyed the charge. I watched the countdown circle complete and fade. At check in the travel card on file declined before boarding even began. I did not need to say it aloud. The timeline was doing that work for me. I stepped to the back door and let the cool air find my face. The lemon tree Rob planted moved its leaves as if someone had just passed by. On another block, a gate agent called boarding groups for a different flight proof that the world keeps its pace even when your part of it pauses. I stood there long enough to feel the house breathe behind me, then returned to the table and set my hand flat on the wood to keep it from reaching for words that would unmake nothing. At 9:25, Michael called again with the sound of movement clattering behind him. He asked if the bank had flagged the card as suspicious. I said the bank was aware of the travel context. He asked if I could call them. I said I did not need to call them. There was a small pause, then he said they would step aside and figure it out. We ended there. Some lessons require a room with fluorescent lights and a line of rolling bags to be understood. I opened the family thread and saw a new photo of Olivia and Noah sitting on their suitcases' hats, tilted the kind of brave patience children practice because adults tell them to. I saved the picture and wrote nothing. Loving them did not require performing for the thread. I set the phone down and looked once more at the small page that had carried me through the morning. 4 lines, 4 facts. A boundary held in place by a system that speaks in yes and no rather than please and why. The kettle clicked as it cooled. The neighborhood shifted into late morning sounds, trucks and a dog and the low murmur of someone on a porch call. Inside my phone rested ready to ask me a question to which I already knew the answer. I let the room stay quiet so that when the next ring came I would still belong to myself. 9:05 finds me with the phone face up on the table and the bank app open to the line that matters. The screen lights with Michael's name, and when I answer, the airport floods my kitchen again. Announcements tumble over each other. A suitcase wheel screams for oil. Sabrina in the background asks an agent to run the card again. The call cuts for a second returns, and a scanner chirps a flat refusal that I can feel in my teeth. Michael says it is still the same message and asks if I can check the bank. I say, I will look. We end there because there is nothing else to say that the system has not already said. 9:10 is another slice from the same place. The noise has shifted closer to a counter. I hear Sabrina smoothing her voice into its professional shape as she tells the agent they have a reservation and everything should be taken care of. There is a pause full of keyboard clicks, and then the gentle authority of someone who has stood in that spot for years. The agent explains that the card on file needs the account owner to approve. Michael asks whether there is a way to push it through. I can hear the answer without hearing the words. Process does not bend for tone. 9:13 I get the first name. A clear alto that carries over the clatter introduces herself as M. Green at gate services while asking them to step to one side so the line can move. She is kind, not soft. Sabrina asks if they can try the card one more time since the children are getting anxious. There is that beep again, and then Monsieur Green makes the sentence that cools a whole concourse. Second attempt declined, ma'am. The call drops. The house is suddenly huge. I stand at the sink and rinse an apple I do not want. The knife moves through it anyway because hands like purpose. 9:19 the push notification appears from the bank. It shows an authorization attempt for the villa balance and a countdown ring that asks for my answer. I let it expire. The app notes that the owner did not confirm. Nothing flashes or flares. A rule did its job. 9:23. The phone rings and goes to voicemail because I let it. The message is, Michael's breath pulled tight around a sentence about calling the bank to approve. He adds that the kids are excited and that they have already promised a lay at the gate. People under pressure list the parts of the story that carry no blame. I save the message because a record keeps a heart honest. 9:26 brings another authorization request, smaller, from the car rental counter. The app shows the company name and a pre-authorization amount that is always more than the actual charge will be. I let this one fail the same way. The screen records the fact in quiet type. I walk to the back door and open it a few inches so the air can remind me that not everything is fluorescent. 9:30 a call returns, this time steadier and edged. I answer and say his name to soften the landing. He asks if perhaps the bank flagged something as suspicious. I say the bank is aware of the travel context. He asks if I can call them right now. I say I do not need to call them. There is a beat, and then the sound of Sabrina trying to fill the space with logistics about early check-in and luggage storage, and whether the pool is accessible before rooms are ready. The agent near them repeats something about policy and a card holder. If this were a story about generosity, I would step in. It is not. It is a story about consent. 9:35, the house feels too small, so I carry my cup to the back step and sit where I can see the lemon tree. A neighbor calls to a dog. Somewhere a truck backs reluctantly out of a driveway. I spend 1 minute noticing the world that goes on without asking me for anything. When I come back inside, the phone lights with a new email. 9:45 is the resort address I have learned by heart. Wailea Reef Resort confirms in exact language that pay at check-in requires a successful authorization from the card on file, and that the attempt was declined because owner verification required was not completed. The reservation is canceled under policy. There are no adverbs, only nouns and verbs and the small punctuation of a process finishing its sentence. I file the email inside the travel folder. The paper sounds like a book closing. 9:50 a second email arrives from the snorkeling outfit. They received notice from the resort that the party did not check in and they are canceling the afternoon tour under their terms. A credit will be issued to the original method of payment where applicable. 9:58, the car rental company follows in the same register. The pre-authorization did not hold, and the reservation has been released. They too will send a credit for any fee that touched my account. I feel a tired sort of gratitude for systems that behave predictably. At 9:59, the family thread pings with a photo I do not open and a line I do not read. I know what it shows because airports teach people to document their own surprise. I put the phone down so I will not participate in the theater of it. 10:02. Another authorization request flashes and dies while I slice the apple pieces into smaller segments for no good reason beyond having something to do with a knife that is not sharp words. 10:05. The ring is longer and heavier. I answer, so the next ring will not carry even more weight. Michael's voice has dropped the brightness it wears when he wants to keep a situation from spilling. He asks me again to call the bank. He says the agent believes this can be fixed if the cardholder approves. I say the system is working as designed. He starts to tell me about Olivia's face and stops. I sit with the silence and let it be two separate things at once. Love for a child. a refusal to be used to hurt her grandmother. We end the call before either of us says something we cannot take back. 10:07. I check the bank app not because I doubt it, but because green pixels that spell active can steady a pulse. Owner verification required. Active. The words look like a quiet fence. I scan the room as if to make sure everything is where I left it. Folder by the fruit bowl. Charger coiled. Page on the fridge with 4 lines that are now the only story that matters. LAX to OGG, 10:45. Verification 8:15. Card ending 4821. One primary travel card on file, 1010. The phone vibrates with a new call and I can hear the change before he speaks. This is the voice people keep for emergencies and hospital corridors and moments that collapse time. He says please. He says the kids are here. He asks for help. He does not use the words I am sorry or I was wrong or I chose badly. He does not have to. The situation is speaking fluent consequence. I say nothing. Silence is the only answer that keeps faith with the choice I made in daylight, with all the facts in front of me. I set the phone down and breathe the way the counselor taught me the week after Rob died. In through the nose for 4, hold for 7, out through the mouth for 8. My body remembers how to come back to itself. Through the window the lemon tree shakes once and is still. Somewhere a gate far from theirs begins to board another flight and the announcements carry like weather. In this house nothing dramatic happens. A rule held. A plan kept its promise to the person who made it. Money stayed where it belongs because the owner said it could not be moved. I pick up the apple slice I left on the cutting board and take a bite. It tastes exactly like what it is, simple, clean, enough. By early afternoon, the house felt like a lake after wind, the surface slack and honest. I rinsed my cup, set it to dry, and the email banner slid across my phone. 1:20 in the afternoon, and my son's name in the sender line. I opened it because facts deserve daylight. He wrote that the morning had been a mess and that new bookings were costly. He asked me to return the deposit to help cover what they had to pay. There was no plain sentence that said he understood what he had done. No admission that I had been removed before anyone reached a gate. It read like a receipt followed by a request. I let the screen dim and I listened to my breath count itself back to even. I wrote 2 sentences in my notebook so the thought would live somewhere better than the air. Apology is not negotiation. Respect is not rented by my card. The ink dried into a steady line and my shoulders lowered a notch. I brought the travel folder to the table and filed the resort cancellation, the tour notice, and the car rental release in the front sleeve. Paper is a blunt mercy. It does not argue. It holds what is. Then I went to the hall closet and carried out the small fireproof box Rob and I bought when a man at a free seminar told us to be adults about the future. I opened the binder inside and saw the tabs we labeled with a cheap machine that misprinted every 3rd letter. Trust, power of attorney, health directives, beneficiaries. The pages smelled faintly of plastic and time. I read the trust first. Years ago, we named Michael as first successor trustee because that made sense when the picture in our heads had a different frame. I turned to the durable financial power of attorney and saw the same choice. Primary agent, broad authority designed to be a help in an emergency, and now too wide for the world as it is. I checked beneficiary designations we had stapled in and realized how years can outpace paperwork. Nothing was wrong when we wrote it. Nothing is safe if you never look again. I put a pen in my hand and made a list meant for a person who knows how to make documents behave. Could I add a co-trustee so no single hand could move assets without a second set of eyes? Could a professional fiduciary sit between family and funds if needed? Could the power of attorney require 2 signatures above a clear dollar threshold so a crisis could be handled but not leveraged? Could the bank and the brokerage keep a trusted contact on file who would be called if something ever looked wrong? I added one more line. Update beneficiaries so they match reality and not a photograph. I searched my phone for elder law in my part of town, even though I already had a name because I wanted to see it arrive as if chosen by the day itself. Harper Diaz appeared near the top, a woman about my age, in a small photo with a direct expression that told me she prefers clarity to theater. I called. The receptionist answered with the brisk kindness of someone who keeps a calendar in her head. I said I wanted a review of an existing revocable trust powers of attorney and beneficiary designations with an eye toward boundary setting and fraud prevention. I said I was not in crisis and wanted to be in better shape than yesterday. She offered Tuesday morning at 9:30. I said yes. She asked me to bring the binder a recent bank statement, a list of all accounts with current beneficiaries, and any passwords written on paper that I would be willing to read aloud to confirm what I thought I knew. I smiled at the phrase written on paper and told her I could do that. She sent an intake form before we ended the call. Next, I called Redwood Community Bank and asked to add a trusted contact and to confirm beneficiary designations on the accounts they hold. A young man named Victor verified me. He asked for the name and number of the person the bank should notify if they ever saw unusual activity and could not reach me. I gave him Janet from next door because she answers the phone and asks questions in straight lines. He read it back and saved it. Then a specialist walked through each account with me and confirmed the pay on death entries. 2 were current. 1 needed to be fixed. We corrected it while I sat on the edge of my bed with the binder open and my pen uncapped. She suggested real-time alerts for any transaction above a threshold. I chose an amount small enough to reveal nonsense and large enough not to make a chorus of pings. She asked whether I wanted a temporary freeze at the credit bureaus to block new accounts in my name. I said I would address that after counsel reviewed my plan. We ended with a thank you that felt earned by both of us. Back in the kitchen, I opened Michael's email again and read it like a lawyer might, even though I am not one. It asked for money and did not admit harm. It brought up the children and did not touch the choice that put them in a hallway holding hats, while adults tried to spend funds without permission. I did not reply. I archived it in a folder labeled for the month and year, because dates matter when memory becomes creative. The intake packet from Harper Diaz arrived with a short list of questions. I printed it and filled the boxes in block letters that made me look steadier than I felt. Under goals, I wrote clear lanes for family ad oversight, prevent misuse. Under concerns, I wrote that kindness had turned into a subsidy for disrespect, and I wanted documents that remembered the difference. The last question asked what outcome would make me feel safe. I wrote a sentence as plain as a door. My boundaries enforce themselves, so my heart does not have to. I called Janet to tell her I had listed her with the bank and to ask if I could use her porch for a courier pickup if the firm needed originals and I could not drive over. She said yes and asked if I needed anything from the market. I said I was fine and meant it. After we hung up, I stood by the window and looked at the lemon tree Rob planted the year we moved in. Its branches carried fruit like small suns, and for a moment I felt the simple physics of a thing that grows because it has what it needs. I placed the binder, the intake form, and the travel folder on the table as if I were setting 3 places for a meal I owed myself. Then I made tea and checked the bank app again, not from worry, but because green pixels spelling active still calm my pulse. Owner verification required remained in place. Alerts were on. A trusted contact sat on the profile like a quiet sentinel. I made a note to bring a list of logins to the meeting, not for anyone to keep, only so I could read names and confirm designations with a second set of eyes. Late afternoon drifted in. I deleted a calendar reminder for airport drop-off that had no reason to exist anymore. It felt good to remove a task instead of chasing one. I tidied the counter that did not need tidying and slid the kids' gift bags deeper into the closet so I would stop touching them like a wound. I thought about sending a single line to Michael that said I had received his email and that I would not be returning any deposit. I pictured the replies it would invite and closed the message without typing. Silence is not passive when it keeps faith with a boundary. When the tea cooled, I took a sip and tasted what a good decision tastes like. Plain and honest. Enough. Control had left the tight space behind my ribs and returned to my hands where it belongs. The bank would call me if anything tried to move without me. The binder was on its way to a lawyer who could put teeth in paper so I would not have to bear my own. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote the time and address for Tuesday in Old Town and underlined it twice. Then I set my pen down and let the house fill with the ordinary sounds that come when something difficult is finally in order. The house stayed level and my head finally had room to sort cause from habit. I pulled a legal pad toward me and wrote a single heading in small letters so it would not try to be a speech. Pattern, not episode. Then I began to lay out the pieces the way an accountant spreads receipts across a table until the number you suspected appears without effort. First there was Thanksgiving, the year Janet next door brought over a pie and a photo of the phone. It was the living room in Sabrina's parents' place, a lot of artificial candles, and 3 generations arranged like a catalog page. The caption labeled the picture family unit only. I remember the kindness on Janet's face as she showed it to me and apologizing for showing it at all, as if truth could be kinder if it arrived by mail. I put the dish in my sink and told myself then that captions are often careless. Today it reads like a title to a chapter that had been underway long before I noticed. Second was the thread that lives on our phones and pretends to be a kitchen table. Across months, it gathered errands and jokes and plans, and most often for me, a small line that said my message had been read without anything that felt like an answer. You learn not to chase replies, because chasing turns dignity into a hobby. Read and no response is its own language. It says we saw you and we have chosen not to meet you where you are. Third was the steady work of reputation, the kind that happens in hallways and parking lots after events that should have been simple. Sabrina spoke to relatives with a practiced, gentle emphasis that presented me as inflexible and likely to make a trip harder than it needed to be. I did not hear her say it to my face. I did not need to. People who care about me told me later in the tone friends use when they deliver a thing you cannot unknow. I had chalked it up to differing styles. A woman who loves a schedule and a woman who loves a plan can coexist if respect does its job. But a plan offered with love can be downgraded to a nuisance if someone needs a reason to redraw the guest list. Fourth was the slow migration of holidays from my table to other tables without conversation that would have cost no one a drop of blood. 1 year became 2, and then the pattern was complete. I was not asked to bring a dish that belongs to me. I was told a time to arrive that did not leave room for my rolls to warm with the other plates. A person can adapt to new food and new chairs. What is harder to digest is the sense that you were invited in the last 10 minutes, so there would not be trouble, and so the photographs would not be questioned. I wrote each of these on the pad in a narrow column and left space beside them for the dates I could remember. Then I set the pen down and let the picker stand. The temptation to make excuses for everyone shifted in my chest like a habit that finally knows it has run out of places to hide. There is a difference between a mistake and a method. A mistake can be addressed. A method pretends to be weather and asks you to dress differently. I went to the fridge and cleared the corner where postcards live. I found a small square of paper in the drawer that holds rubber bands and warranties, and wrote 6 words that I could stand to read when the house was still or loud. No more funding disrespect. I stuck it beside the grocery list where my hand lands every morning. The neatness of the letters mattered to me. A boundary written messily is easier to ignore. Sitting again, I let my memory move through smaller scenes that pair with the larger ones like footnotes. The Christmas sweaters that never included my size because no one asked what it was. The summer barbecue where group photos were divided into kids' nuclear families, and I have to go feed the dog before anyone suggested one with me in it. The way my stories about Rob were received as weather reports from a state no one planned to visit. None of these are criminal. All of them add up. I thought about the words older women sometimes use when they are trying to stay invited. Flexible, easygoing, low maintenance. I have been all 3 at different times because those are good things when they are freely chosen. They become something else when they are demanded as payment for inclusion. I am not a surcharge you avoid by booking a different room. I took the legal pad to the window because light helps me read my own handwriting. On a new line, I wrote a sentence that told the truth without costume. This is a social pattern of exclusion justified as preference. Under it, I listed the new behaviors that answer it. Confirm every invoice carries my name if I am paying. Set boundaries in the bank settings, not only in my mouth. Put legal documents in order so money cannot be used to buy silence from a person who loves to keep the peace. Decline to perform at the scene of a disrespect that has already been staged. Each line felt like a broom pass across a floor that needed it. My phone vibrated with a message from Janet asking how I was doing and whether I needed anything from the market after all. I told her I was fine and that I had listed her as a trusted contact with the bank. She sent back a heart typed out as a word, not the symbol, which is the sort of small choice that makes me like her more. She said she remembered the Thanksgiving photo and that the caption had bothered her then. I wrote that it had turned out to be more descriptive than anyone wanted. At the sink, I washed the apple plate from earlier because finishing a small task is how I end one thought and begin another. I looked again at the note on the fridge and imagined the ways the sentence would be tested. A birthday where I am asked to front deposits because I know how to read the fine print. A holiday trip where I am told the children will be disappointed if I do not pay for a suite. A phone call in which the words "We are family" arrive dressed as a key to a vault that has my name on it. The note answers all 3 without moving its mouth. I let myself think of Olivia and Noah and the gap between the kindness they deserve and the theater around them that keeps changing costumes. I pictured a future day when we sit with lemonade on the steps and I tell them that love means you do not spend from a person who is not welcome at the table. Children understand fairness long before adults convince them to ignore it. The promise I made this morning still has a place to live in my chest. On the pad, I wrote one more short list because paper is how I keep my days honest. Call insurance agent to confirm beneficiaries on the policy that never made it into the binder. Check brokerage logins and print a list of accounts to bring to Tuesday. Draft a short script for future requests so I do not have to write from scratch while my pulse is up. The script will be 2 sentences at most. Thank you for thinking of me. I will not be funding this. The afternoon moved forward in the ordinary way afternoons do when nothing dramatic is required. I watered the fern by the back door and bumped its pot a 1/4 inch so it would catch more light. I folded 2 towels that did not need it and put them where they always go. When I walked back through the kitchen, I caught sight of the note again and let its plainness do what it was made to do. 6 words. A promise to myself in the language of a bill paid on time. I set the pen beside the pad and sat long enough to let quiet finish a sentence I have been trying to write for years. I let the small square on the fridge claim its place, then scrolled to the women who have never made me feel optional. Marla picked up first 70 and still carrying a choir with a pitch pipe and a spine that does not bend for nonsense. I told her I was building a week of ocean air and a long table for 7. She laughed like a bell and said she could clear her calendar. B answered next from a quiet kitchen 66 and retired from decades of night shifts and said her suitcase stayed half-packed and the cats could be assigned to the neighbor. Louise at 71 spoke over the soft hum of her sewing machine and offered to bring needles, and I told her presence would be enough. Frances at 69, who walked mail in every kind of weather, said she kept a sun hat by the door because hope should be within reach. Beverly at 64, caregiver by love and habit, whispered that she would need 3 days to arrange coverage, and then she paused and chose to take those days. Lucille at 72, librarian retired, but still arranging the world in tidy rows, wanted to know what books the villa might have and whether I minded a bag of paperbacks. I told her the ocean would do most of the reading. Then I called Renee Park at Pacific Horizon Travel. I said plans had changed, and what I wanted now was simple and clean. A shortened trip to Maui flights from Los Angeles to Kahului, one villa in Wailea with flat paths, and a real dining table car service to avoid a counter, and a flexible schedule with one evening set aside for something quiet. Renee asked for names and birth dates, and went to work in that calm way that makes a room breathe. Refund credits from the canceled week had already begun landing. She applied them in order. Every invoice carried my name. Every confirmation pulled from my account. No authorized users, no confusion. I wrote a small card for each woman to slide beside her plate. For Marla, I wrote an affirmation about being heard without having to sing for her supper. For B, I wrote that care is not a resource to be mined. For Louise, I wrote that she mends what matters and does not stitch herself small. For Frances, I wrote that a lifetime of standing earns a good seat. For Beverly, I wrote that she is more than the emergencies she solves. For Lucille, I wrote that quiet competence is valuable even when no one claps. For myself, I wrote that I pay for peace and keep the receipt. We met at LAX on a Tuesday that already wanted spring. 6 women arrived with carry-ons that looked like practice. Marla had a slim black case with music tucked into the front. B carried a compact kit because a nurse is a nurse even when she is not on duty. Louise wore a dress she had altered for her own comfort, and it hung just right. Frances laced up shoes built for honest miles. Beverly checked her phone once and then set it in her bag on purpose. Lucille handed me a paperback about salt and courage. We did not pose by the curb. We moved like travelers. On the plane, the talk drifted the way good talk does when no one is auditioning. Marla told a story about a soprano who found her own ear in her 70s and now sings like an opening door. Bea remembered a night shift where a man calmed only when someone asked about the fish he caught with his father. Louise described rebuilding a dress so a granddaughter could carry a grandmother down an aisle without drowning in fabric. Frances admitted she still sorts mail by hand because sometimes a letter does save a life. Beverly said she had packed a small jar of face cream that felt like 5 minutes to herself. Lucille said libraries have always been sanctuaries for people who need attention that does not charge admission. I listened and felt a hush arrive that did not ask for applause. Maui greeted us like it greets anyone who pays attention. Warm air that does not apologize. A driver held a sign with my name and led us to a van that did not smell like old air. At the villa, the manager walked us through rooms that understood light. The patio offered a clean line of water and sky and palms. In the kitchen, a fruit basket weighted with little cards that tried to charm. I set Rob's photo on the dining table first. Walnut frame darker each year it lives in a house. He looked back with the grin he wore the day he insisted a groaning Jeep would make the Hana Road more honest. I placed a lavender candle beside him and left the match in the drawer for later. The women found their corners. Marla touched the keys of the small piano under the window and nodded as if approving a bridge. Bea rearranged mugs by size without thinking. Louise checked a cushion seam with her fingertip and smiled. Frances chose a patio chair that would not argue with her back. Beverly stood at the slider and watched the water find its rhythm. Lucille scanned the bookshelf and began a quiet reordering only she could explain. We cooked simple dinner and ate without anyone guarding the clock. Bread that cracked clean, fish that tasted like a nearby ocean, a salad that remembered what greens are supposed to do. I set the cards by each plate. No speeches, only the truth. A line had been crossed back home, and I had chosen to hold it without yelling. Travel can be about distance or about return. Tonight it felt like both. No one performed gratitude. They lifted their cards and tucked them away like useful maps. After dishes, we let the light settle. I lit the lavender candle and the scent rose like memory that has decided to be kind. I said one sentence about Rob. He taught me that you do not have to earn a seat by paying for the table. Marla hummed a note that lived under the moment without asking to be noticed. Bea drank water like a reverse medicine. Louise straightened the tablecloth corner. Frances rested both hands on the wood. Beverly leaned back and closed her eyes for 2 breaths. Lucille opened the book she had brought and read the first line as if to bless the room. We carried our chairs outside. The moon threw silver over the water. Conversation moved to small things that tell the truth better than big ones. The best way to keep herbs alive on a sill. Why socks never fit the way the package swears they will. How neighbors return trash cans to the wrong driveway, and you forgive them because the cans made it home at all. We rested in the kind of quiet that collects when women who have worked all their lives finally sit without being useful. Later, I blew out the candle and watched the thin thread of smoke lift and vanish. Rob's face in the frame looked like approval without words. Money had not bought this. Money had stepped aside so we could sit down. When I lay in bed with the window open to the sound of the ocean, being itself a sentence settled the way a body settles into sand. When I stopped funding disrespect, I could finally afford my own peace. I slept with the easy sense that the house and I would take turns holding watch. Morning calm traveled home with me and stayed. By Saturday, I packed a small picnic like a promise kept. Apple slices, peanut butter crackers, 2 little field guides on tide pools, and bright wristbands for motion in the car. I drove to Central Park in Pasadena and chose a bench where the jacaranda makes stubborn shade. Michael had picked the time. Olivia and Noah spotted me and ran the last stretch with knees and laughter flying. I knelt to catch them and started with the ocean, so nothing else had room to crowd in. I told them the water near Maui can look like a painting and that sea turtles rise to breathe as if they are nodding hello to the horizon. We tried on the names we liked. Green sea turtle, hawksbill. Olivia decided the green must enjoy a tidy rock garden. Noah asked if turtles get to go down slides. I said the ocean makes one for them every day, and we let the image do the work of joy. We spread a small blanket. The field guides turned facts into pets the way good pictures do. Olivia traced a shell ridge with one finger and asked how to be kind to wild things. I said you watch, you do not chase, and you give back what you pick up. Noah pledged to return every crab to its exact spot, even if he liked its funny eyes. We talked about salt hat sunblock and the trick of drinking water before you think you want it. No sentence mentioned parents. The air stayed gentle. Michael arrived with juice pouches like a truce. He sat on the grass, asked about my lemon tree, and said the weather had been confused all week. Small talk did its small duty. Then he used the phrase people reach for when they want a story to behave. He said the whole thing was behind us, and we should focus on the kids. I looked at Olivia brushing crumbs from Noah's knees and gave the sentence I had practiced. If there was a specific apology, I would listen, and we would not negotiate with my wallet. I kept my voice even the way someone reads a recipe. He nodded, let the silence sit, and shifted to logistics, because logistics do not flinch. Weekends were better for them. I said I wanted time that did not require performance or stage directions. He agreed that a small plan serves small people, so we made one. Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach the following Saturday, timed entry mid-morning, lunch on site so no one has to guard a clock. I would buy our tickets and cover the children's food, separate payments for anything else. He would handle drop-off and pick-up. We chose the parking structure by the dinosaur topiary because children like landmarks. The kids jumped back in to debate whether sea jellies are parachutes or ghosts. I said they are like the hem of a ballroom dress, and Olivia decreed that turtles would prefer parachutes. Noah declared ghosts are only for October, and we let him keep that. While the crackers disappeared, my phone buzzed. Harper's name sat in the inbox with a subject that named its contents: Draft Amendments to the Trust and the Durable Financial Power of Attorney. I did not open it on the blanket. I wanted to be a grandmother at a picnic, not a client reading clauses. I set the phone face down and showed Noah the trick of coaxing a ladybug onto an index finger. Michael watched, and the three of us let the quiet do its job. When the snacks were gone, we walked the loop near the playground. Olivia practiced reading the park rules sign, and Noah tested each climbing hold as if one might hide a prize. I told them the aquarium touch pool would have a rule of 2 gentle fingers and no grabbing. They repeated it with the solemnity of a vow. After an hour, I said I would head home to book the good entry window before it filled. Michael gathered wrappers, thanked me for the snacks, and said he would text if the drop-off time needed to slide because of traffic. I said, a small delay is not a crisis. Olivia hugged with both arms and told me her turtle name would be Penny because pennies are lucky. Noah announced his turtle name would be Rocket because speed is fun. I made both names official in my pocket of memory and sent them off with a wave that did not cling. The house was cool, and the binder waited where I had left it. I opened Harper's email and read slowly, lips moving without sound, like a child learning on purpose. The trust amendment added a co-trustee so no single hand could move assets without a second set of eyes. It offered the option of a professional fiduciary if family roles grew too hot to hold. The power of attorney revision kept Michael as agent, but required a second signature above a clear dollar threshold and a duty to inform a neutral party within 48 hours of any action. Gift language closed the doors that should be shut and drew a clear path for the few that might need to open. Harper included a plain letter of instruction and a reminder to add Janet as a backup trusted contact. We would sign Tuesday morning in Old Town with a notary. I wrote the time on a bright note and stuck it to the binder so my future self would not need to think. Next, I opened the aquarium site and chose 10:15. 2 child tickets, 1 senior parking add-on, so I would not spend the morning out walking a garage. I added the sea turtle encounter in the early afternoon since it lands between lunch and the grumpy hour. I paid saved barcodes to my phone and printed a copy because paper still calms me. I texted Michael like a grocery list. Timed entry 10:15. Drop off 9:55 at the dinosaur topiary. I will cover the children's tickets and lunch. Please send any allergies. Pick up 1:30 at the same spot. He replied confirmed with a line about sunscreen and hats. I laid out a small backpack for Saturday. Wet wipes, hand sanitizer, a zip bag for found treasures, the motion bands for the car, and the field guides tucked in the front pouch. I dropped 2 pennies into a side pocket for Penny and a silver rocket sticker for Rocket, because names deserve tokens. I wrote Kids First on the calendar block and underlined it so the day would see itself. Evening carried an ordinary sweetness. I pinched basil tips in the yard. Janet called over the fence to ask if I needed anything, and I told her I would drop a spare key in her mailbox in case a courier ever needed the porch on Tuesday. She said she would be home and that she liked the sound of a plan. Inside, I printed Harper's intake page and finished the small boxes for account lists and contact people. I slipped the pages into the binder and set a pen with real ink on top so I would not chase one at the last minute. Before bed, I wrote a line in the notebook that has become my ledger of the heart. Park time held without blame. Kids scheduled for sea turtles. Legal paper moving toward teeth. I closed the book and set it under the travel folder. The house breathed the way houses do when a day has been honest. I turned out the light with the sense that tomorrow would not need an argument to begin well. Tuesday came clear over Old Town, and I carried the binder to Harper Diaz like a person bringing a promise to the place it becomes real. The receptionist knew my name, and a notary waited with a calm pen. Harper walked me page by page in plain words. The trust amendment added a co-trustee so no single hand could move assets without a second set of eyes. It allowed a professional fiduciary if family roles turned hot. The durable financial power of attorney kept Michael as agent, but required a second signature above a clear amount and a duty to notify a neutral person after any action. Gift language closed the doors that needed closing and drew a clean path for help that does not bend boundaries. I signed, and the stamp landed with a small thunder that finally belonged to me. On a bench under a pepper tree, I called Redwood Community Bank. Victor confirmed the trusted contact sits on my profile, and that alerts fire for any transaction above the number I chose. A specialist read back pay on death names, and they matched the pages in my lap. She listed the travel reversals while I wrote them into my ledger. Resort balance reversed. Tour fee credited. Car hold released. Airline issued a travel credit in my name with an expiration I copied onto a bright sticky note. I thanked her for treating consent like more than courtesy and drove home with the binder tucked in my arm the way you carry a child who can walk but sometimes should be held. Renee Park had sent a tidy email that read like a ledger written as kindness. Refunds applied in order. New confirmations for the Maui week that became ours. All of it under my name and drawing from my account. Every invoice had my name. Every confirmation pulled from my account. Paper and pixels agreed, and for the first time since this began, my breath did not argue with either. At the table, I opened my notebook and wrote the line that carried me through the hardest part. I did not freeze it out of spite. I froze it because boundaries deserve funding too. The sentence did not need applause. It needed to sit there and be true. That night, I set Rob's photo at the end of the table and lit a lavender candle. I thanked the quiet for staying with me while I learned a better way to say no. From a small stack, I took a postcard printed with a sea turtle and wrote to Olivia about 2 gentle fingers at the touch pool and how turtles climb water the way we climb stairs and how lucky a penny can feel in a small hand. I signed it with the name she uses when she wants time to slow and tucked it in a drawer so I can hand it to her on a day that belongs to us. Michael sent a late message that the week had been heavy and he wanted to move forward. I let it rest until morning because night turns every reply into a costume. Over breakfast, I answered in 2 lines that I would listen to a specific apology and that my wallet was not a place for negotiation. He replied understood, and the silence after it was one I could live with. Saturday kept the plan we made in the park. I packed the small backpack and reached Long Beach early enough to breathe before small hands arrived. The dinosaur topiary guarded the entrance. Michael handled drop-off. I handled the day. Inside the aquarium of the Pacific, the tanks did the teaching. Olivia read placards as if the fish needed to hear them. Noah tried to hold his breath as long as a seal and then laughed at himself. At the touch pool, they repeated the rule like a vow. 2 gentle fingers. No grabbing. A volunteer guided their hands toward a bat ray, and both children squealed and then whispered sorry to the water. At the turtle window, Noah pressed his palm to the glass and said nothing at all, which told me everything. We ate simple lunch in the shade. Apples and grilled cheese, and water bottles we remembered to refill. The children told me they want to visit the beach with me when the weather warms, because my stories about waves do not make anyone feel bad. I said we would go when the grown-ups remember to be careful, and they nodded as if that had always been the rule. In the gift shop, I set a budget and let them choose inside it. Olivia picked a tiny green glass turtle and held it up to the light. Noah chose a sheet of Bright Rocket stickers. I paid with my card and felt how light ordinary spending is when it honors the person doing it. Drop-off was calm. Michael thanked me. I said the kids did well. Olivia pressed the glass turtle into my hand and told me to look at it by candlelight so it would glow. Noah saved the brightest rocket for me. I put both gifts in my bag and waved them off with an ease that belongs to days that keep their promises. At home, I set the little turtle near Rob's photo and lit the candle again. The glass caught the flame and sent a green tremor across the frame. I did the small accounting that closes a story. Resort and tour and car credits received. Airline voucher filed with its date where I can see it. Bank alerts quiet. Trust and power of attorney updated and signed. The folder that once felt like a weight now felt like a well-kept file. I wrote a final entry in the notebook that has become the ledger of my heart. I was written out of a trip I paid for, and I answered with lawful timing instead of a scene. I set a lock at the bank and a line in my mouth. I protected old savings and opened a better future. I chose a different table and filled it with women who know how to sit and stay. I kept a promise to 2 children without using them as leverage. I will not count wins and losses. I will count receipts that match my values and moments that let me breathe. The candle burned low. I blew it out and watched the smoke draw a thin line that rose and vanished. The room held the soft scent of lavender and the steadier scent of my own yes. If you have ever been written out of a trip you paid for, and if you believe a boundary can be a kind of love you owe yourself, stay with me here. Share your story, leave a thought, and follow this channel for more quiet victories, where silence turns into strength and memories find a safe harbor. I will keep a chair at the table and a light in the window for whoever needs to arrive next.